When I woke up, my tent was the only one left in the clearing. The second before my eyes focused, I heard the sound that still crawls up my spine in my sleep. Low panting, measured, patient, like the forest itself was breathing around me. The air was cold enough to sting. The nylon walls bowed inward as something moved outside, brushing past. I sat up too fast and my head clipped the tent pole. Then the pain hit my leg, not the dull ache of a cramped old man's knee, not the sharp jab of a thorn. This was heat and pressure and teeth working into flesh with calm purpose, as if the creature biting me had done it before and knew exactly where to bite to keep me alive long enough to suffer. I screamed and kicked, my heel catching fur. A muzzle snapped back, yellow eyes flaring in the dim light. Another shape glided closer, then another, silent as smoke. Wolves. A whole pack, fanned out around my tent like they owned the clearing. One was already inside, half in, half out, jaws clamped on my calf. I clawed for the zipper with shaking hands. My fingers slipped, slick with condensation and blood. I got it open a few inches, and the cold air poured in, bringing the stink of wet animal and old meat. The wolves didn't rush. They waited. They watched. They knew I couldn't run. And that was the moment my mind did something cruel. It didn't show me my wife's face first. It didn't show me my grandchildren laughing in my backyard. It showed me my son's smile from the night before, the way he'd poured me coffee and patted my shoulder like a good boy playing a part. It showed me how carefully he'd insisted on this trip. Just you and me, Dad, like old times. One last camping weekend before you step down. My whole life flashed before my eyes, but it wasn't the sweet parts. It was every time I'd ignored the coldness in him because it was easier than admitting the truth. Every time I'd handed him money like it was love. Every time I told myself he would grow into decency because he was my blood. He wasn't my blood in that clearing. He was the reason the wolves were here. I knew it with the certainty of an animal smelling fire. I tried to yank my leg free, and the wolf's teeth dug deeper, not frantic, not panicked, just steady. The world narrowed to the sound of my own breath and the ripping pain and the wet crunch of the ground under shifting paws. Then, from the bushes behind my tent, I heard something else. Heavy movement. A low, thunderous growl that didn't belong to any wolf I'd ever heard. A blur exploded out of the underbrush like a boulder coming downhill. Massive chest, white fur spattered with mud. A St. Bernard, bigger than some men, barreling straight into the pack as if it had been born for one purpose, to break the forest's quiet in half. The wolves snapped and scattered, startled by the sudden violence of it. The St. Bernard slammed into the one on my leg, jaws clamping not on flesh, but on scruff, shaking hard enough to fling it aside. The pack's confidence fractured. Their eyes flicked from dog to me, calculating, deciding the meal wasn't worth the risk. In seconds they were retreating, melting into trees. The dog stood between me and the woods, shoulders heaving, teeth bared, a wall of muscle and instinct. It turned its head toward my torn leg, then toward the empty space where my son's tent had been. And it barked once, deep and furious, like it understood betrayal. That bark was the only thing that kept me conscious long enough to crawl out of my tent and see what my son had done. No sleeping bag where his had been. No camp chair. No cooler. Even the tracks around his spot were gone, brushed out like he'd taken time to erase himself. He hadn't run from wolves. He'd left me to them. And if that St. Bernard hadn't been there, I would have died in that clearing, alone, with the taste of my son's lie in my mouth. I lay there trembling, my hands pressed against my calf, blood warm through my fingers. The dog's breath came in loud gusts. It nudged me once, not gentle, not cruel, just urgent, as if telling me, move, stay alive. In the distance, a whistle cut through the trees. A man's voice followed. "Bruno! Bruno! Heel!" The dog's ears flicked, but it didn't leave me. It held its ground until a figure pushed through the brush. A forest ranger in a green jacket, broad-shouldered, moving fast with a rifle slung across his back. He saw my leg, saw the torn tent, saw the empty campsite. His face tightened with the kind of anger that comes from seeing too many preventable tragedies. "Sir," he said, already dropping to one knee. "Don't move. Let me see." My voice came out thin. "My son. He was here." The ranger's eyes swept the clearing. "Not anymore." I swallowed hard enough to hurt. "He left me." The ranger looked at me like he wanted to argue, but the evidence was everywhere. My torn calf, the dragged impressions in the dirt where wolves had circled, the neat absence where another tent should have been. He ripped open a medical kit from his pack and wrapped my leg with practiced hands. Bruno stood over us like a living barricade, staring at the trees. The ranger said, "Name?" "Anthony Richardson." His eyebrows flicked. He recognized it. People did. Not because I was famous, but because my company's instruments were in half the hospitals in the state. We made precision devices surgeons trusted with trembling hands. That kind of work buys you quiet respect. He said, "You're that Richardson." I managed a nod. "Who are you?" "Caleb Warren," he said. "I patrol this tract. Bruno's my partner. He doesn't like wolves near people." My vision wavered. "He saved my life." Caleb finished the wrap, tightened it, then leaned in. "Sir, listen to me. Wolves don't just stroll into a campsite like this unless there's bait. Something drew them in." My stomach sank because the thought had already formed in me, ugly and clear. My son had baited them. I whispered, "He planned it." Caleb's jaw flexed. "We'll get you out. Then we'll talk to law enforcement." Law enforcement. Courts. Procedures. I'd spent my life in boardrooms where people smiled while they drove knives into each other's backs. I knew how slow institutions could be. I also knew something else. My son wasn't just trying to kill me for sport. He was trying to take what I owned. And if he was willing to feed his father to wolves, there was no limit to what he'd do once he had my company in his hands. Caleb helped me to my feet. Pain shot up my leg, making the world flash white. Bruno pressed against my hip, steadying me, as if he understood I was old and the ground was uneven. Caleb guided me toward his ATV, and as the forest shifted around us, my mind locked onto one single thought, hard as steel. If my son wanted me dead, he'd already decided I was in his way, which meant I wasn't safe in my own life anymore. And if I survived this, if I made it back to civilization, I was going to find out exactly what else he'd been doing while I was busy pretending he was still my boy. Because men like him don't start with wolves. Wolves are the last step of a long plan. And I had a feeling my son had been planning longer than I wanted to admit. I'll tell you how it began. It began with a promise I made to my late wife in a hospital room, a promise I failed to keep because love makes you blind. It began with a company I built with my hands and my mind, and the mistake of believing blood mattered more than character. And it began with one decision I thought was generous, even noble, stepping down and handing control to someone who deserved it, someone who was not my son. 3 weeks before that camping trip, I'd stood in the glass conference room on the top floor of Richardson Medical Instruments and watched the city glow below like a circuit board. The building smelled of polished wood and coffee, the kind of smell executives think means stability. I'd worked in that building for 35 years. I'd made every hard call inside those walls. My heart had not been as steady lately. The doctor called it a warning. I called it a message. It wasn't a full heart attack, but it was enough to wake me up in the middle of the night with sweat on my chest and fear in my throat. I was 71. A grandfather. I still walked my grandkids to the park on Sundays when my schedule allowed. I still climbed stairs without stopping. But I'd started to see the edge of the cliff, and I wasn't interested in falling off while clinging to a title. So I made a plan. Step down. Stay on as an advisor for a year. Hand the company to someone sharp, steady, and ethical. My board wanted my son, Daniel. Of course they did. Daniel had my last name, and last names make investors feel warm. Daniel also had a talent for charm that could fill a room and a hunger that could empty it. He didn't have patience. He didn't have conscience. He didn't have respect for the work. He had always wanted the company, not because he loved it, but because he loved the power it represented. I'd tried to raise him better. I'd tried. After my wife, Margaret, died, Daniel's grief had curdled into something hard and selfish. He acted like the world owed him comfort for his pain. He spent money like it was proof he existed. He moved from one reckless venture to another, always expecting me to clean it up because I was his father. I had cleaned it up too many times. The man I wanted as my successor was not family. He was the son of my oldest friend. His name was Aaron Mitchell, 32. Grew up around machine shops and hospital corridors, watching his father work overtime while his mother packed lunches for nurses. Aaron wasn't flashy. He asked good questions. He listened. He'd come up through our quality division and earned respect the slow way, with competence. My friend Thomas Mitchell had been my right hand in the early years, when we were two men in a rented warehouse, arguing about tolerances and FDA paperwork with grease under our nails. Thomas died 5 years ago. The day we buried him, Aaron looked me in the eye and said, "I'm going to make you proud, the way my dad did." I believed him. So I brought Aaron into the room and I said it out loud, in front of the board. I'm naming Aaron Mitchell interim CEO upon my retirement, with the intent to confirm him as permanent CEO at the end of the year. Silence, sharp enough to cut. Then Daniel laughed. Not a happy laugh. A short, disbelieving bark that made heads turn. He said, "You're joking." I kept my voice calm. "I'm not." Daniel's eyes went bright with humiliation. He didn't shout. He didn't slam the table. That would have been too obvious. He smiled and nodded like a man being reasonable. But I knew my son. I knew the way his jaw tightened when he wanted to hurt someone and had to pretend he didn't. He said, "If that's what you want, Dad." Then he looked at Aaron like Aaron was something stuck to his shoe. After the meeting, Daniel cornered me in my office. The walls were lined with awards and framed photos, surgeries we'd supported, teams we'd built, my wife holding our newborn son, my grandkids in Halloween costumes. Daniel stood under those pictures as if he didn't belong to them. He closed the door behind him. "You're really doing this." "I am," I said. "You're handing my company to someone else." "It's not your company," I said quietly. "It's mine. And it's the work of thousands of people who deserve leadership that won't gamble their livelihoods for your ego." His smile thinned. "So that's what you think of me." "I think you can be better," I said, and I meant it, even then. "But you haven't been." Daniel took a step closer. "You think everyone loves you, don't you? The noble founder, the generous old man. But you're just afraid." "Afraid of what?" He leaned in, voice low. "Afraid that I'm the only person who really knows you." That sentence should have chilled me more than it did. I was tired. My chest still felt bruised from the doctor's warning. I wanted peace. I wanted the fantasy of a son who would accept guidance. I said, "Daniel, you're my son. I love you. But this company can't be a consolation prize for your anger." His eyes flicked over the photos of his children on my shelf. My 2 grandchildren, Emma and Luke. His voice softened by a fraction, and that softness fooled the part of me that still wanted to believe. "Then spend time with me," he said. "Just you and me. No board, no lawyers, no Aaron Mitchell. We go up to Black Pines like when I was a kid. We camp. We talk. I show you I'm not who you think. Black Pines was a state forest 3 hours away. We'd gone there when he was 12, before the teenage years hardened him, before my wife got sick. I remembered him laughing in the creek, trying to catch fish with his bare hands and failing, and looking at me like I was the strongest man in the world. I said yes. I told myself it could heal something. That was my mistake. 2 days before the trip, Daniel came to my house with brand new camping gear. Brand new everything, like he wanted to scrub history clean and replace it with fresh nylon and plastic. He loaded my truck for me, talking too much, smiling too wide. "Dad, you're going to love this," he said, hauling a cooler into the bed. No phones, no emails, just woods. My house was quiet without Margaret. It was a beautiful quiet, most days, filled with the soft ticking of a clock and the memory of her singing while she cooked. But Daniel's energy made it feel like a stage. He walked through my kitchen, opened drawers as if he owned them, and poured himself coffee without asking. "Emma made you this," I said, pointing to a crooked drawing on the fridge, me holding her hand in a park with a sun too big for the paper. Daniel glanced at it. "Cute." He didn't ask about them. He didn't ask about my doctor visits. He asked about the company. "How long before the board finalizes Aaron?" he said, leaning against my counter. "A year," I said. "And if something happens to you?" The question was too casual. I stared at him. "Nothing is going to happen to me." Daniel lifted both hands. "I'm just saying. You're not young." Something in me stiffened. "My will is in order." He nodded, eyes calm. "Good." He left an hour later. When I watched his taillights disappear down my street, I felt the first true pinch of unease. The kind you ignore because acknowledging it would mean admitting your own child might be dangerous. We drove up to Black Pines early Friday, the sky pale and cold. Daniel talked the whole way. He told stories about his kids in a way that sounded rehearsed, like he'd practiced being tender. He asked me about the early days of the company, questions he'd never cared about before. When we got there, the ranger station was closed for renovations. A handwritten sign on the door said permits could be purchased online. Daniel made a show of checking his phone. "Reception's bad," he said, frowning. "But we'll be fine. We've camped here before." We took an old service road that branched into the forest. Daniel insisted on a remote clearing, away from other campers. "Privacy," he said, "so we can actually talk." We set up camp. He worked efficiently, too efficiently, as if he'd done it 100 times recently. He positioned the tents with strange precision, mine slightly closer to the tree line. He said it was to block wind. That night, we sat by a fire, the forest black beyond the circle of light. Daniel handed me a cup of whiskey. "Toast," he said. "To what?" I asked. He stared into the flames. "To you. To everything you built." I felt something swell in my chest. Hope is a foolish thing. It rises even when you know better. I said, "Thank you." He took a sip, then looked at me. "You're really going to do it, though. You're really going to choose him." "I'm choosing the best leader," I said. "I'm choosing what's right for the company and the people in it." "What about what's right for me?" he asked. "You're not the company, Daniel." His face tightened. "No, I'm just the son you used as an accessory in all your speeches. The family man, the legacy." "That's not true." He leaned forward, voice sharpening. "You love Mom more than you loved me." The sentence hit like a slap. My throat tightened. I'd heard versions of it before, but never so raw. "I loved you both," I said. "She was sick, Daniel. She needed you," he cut in. "And I needed you, but you were always somewhere else, always saving someone, always building something." I stared at the fire. The guilt was familiar, heavy as wet wool. "I made mistakes," I said quietly. "I tried." Daniel's face softened again. He reached across the fire and set his hand on my forearm. His palm was warm. "I want to fix it," he said. "That's why we're here." We stayed up late. He talked. I listened. He made apologies that sounded almost real. He asked me to promise I'd give him a chance. I promised. That promise almost got me killed. Sometime after midnight I went to sleep in my tent, the fire dying down to coals. I remember hearing Daniel move around outside, zipping and unzipping things, the clink of metal. I called out once. "Everything all right?" "Yeah," he said easily. "Just packing up a bit. I want to hike early." I believed him. Then I slept, and woke to teeth in my leg. After Caleb, Warren, and Bruno got me out of that clearing, the world became both sharper and stranger, as if survival had turned up the volume on everything. The ride on the ATV was agony. Every bump sent pain into my calf and up into my hip. Cold air tore at my lungs. Bruno ran alongside the vehicle at first, then hopped onto the back platform like he owned it, leaning against me, steady. At the ranger station, Caleb sat me down and cleaned the wound properly. It wasn't a clean bite. Wolves don't do clean. The edges were ragged, bruised deep. Caleb's hands were competent and gentle. He said, "You need a hospital." I said, "I need my phone." He hesitated. "Hospital first." "My phone," I repeated, and there was something in my voice I didn't recognize. It wasn't anger. It was steel. Caleb handed it to me. No signal at the station. Not enough to call, but enough to see that I had 3 messages, all from Daniel. The timestamps were wrong. Too early. Too neat. First message: "Dad, I had to leave early. Emergency with Emma. I'm sorry. Call me." Second: "Dad, please answer. I'm on my way to the hospital with Emma. I'll explain." Third: "Dad, I'm scared. Please call." The words were designed to do something specific, to make me rush home, distracted, grateful he cared. I stared at the messages until my eyes burned. Caleb watched me. "Your son?" I nodded once. He didn't ask more. He just said, "I'm calling the sheriff. You can tell them what happened." I could have done it then. I could have told the sheriff the truth, let the system grind forward. But I knew Daniel. Daniel would not have left a trail if he didn't think he could control it. If I accused him without proof, he would turn the story. He would cry about his old father's confusion. He would say I'd wandered. He would say wolves attacked and he panicked. He would stand in front of cameras with his children and talk about trauma. And people would believe him because people want simple stories. So I did the first thing I'd learned in business long before I learned it in parenting. I gathered evidence. "Caleb," I said, my voice hoarse, "did you see tracks? Anything unusual?" Caleb nodded slowly. There was something. Drag marks. A smell, too. Like a carcass. Something dead nearby. I swallowed. "Can you take me back there?" He stared at my leg. "Sir, please." Caleb's eyes narrowed, not in annoyance but in calculation. He was weighing risk. Then he said, "Not you. You need medical care. But I can go back. I can document the scene before rain or other animals erase it." I nodded. "Do it." He hesitated. "You think your son baited them?" "I know he did." Caleb's jaw tightened. "Then I'll treat it like a crime scene." Those words were the first kindness I'd felt since waking up in that tent. Someone taking my reality seriously. While Caleb prepared to head out, he drove me to the nearest hospital in the small town at the edge of the forest. The ER was bright and sterile, the kind of place where pain becomes routine. The doctor cleaned my wound, took photos, documented everything. They gave me stitches and antibiotics and a tetanus shot. They asked how it happened. I said, "Animal attack." I didn't say my son, not yet. When I finally got signal, my phone exploded with calls. The board, my assistant, Daniel again, my daughter-in-law, Sabrina, even Aaron Mitchell. I answered Aaron first. "Anthony," he said, voice tight, "where are you? Daniel came into the office this morning saying you had a medical emergency and he needed immediate control. He's trying to access accounts." My blood went cold in a new way. He wasn't waiting for me to die. He was acting like I already had. "Aaron," I said, forcing calm, Lock him out of everything you can." "I can't lock him out of everything," Aaron said. "He has legacy access codes. He's using your name to intimidate staff." "Then listen carefully," I said. "I'm alive. I'm coming home. And I need you to hold the line." A beat of silence. "Alive?" "Yes." "Where are you?" I looked at the hospital curtain, the fluorescent light, the IV tape on my arm. "Not dead," I said. "That's all you need to know right now." Aaron exhaled, relief and fear mixed together. "What happened?" I paused. The truth tasted like rust. "I'll tell you soon," I said. "For now, do not let Daniel sign anything. Do not let him touch our quality systems. Put security on the server rooms. Have it record every keystroke he makes." Aaron didn't hesitate. "Done." I hung up and stared at my phone. Then I answered Daniel. His voice came out instantly, too loud, too emotional. "Dad, thank God. Where are you? I've been losing my mind." "You left me," I said. Silence. Then his voice shifted, careful. "What are you talking about?" "You left me," I repeated, slower. "My tent was the only one left, Daniel. Wolves were in the clearing. One was on my leg." His breath caught, like he'd practiced being shocked. "Oh my God. Dad, I heard something in the night. I thought it was a bear. I panicked. I tried to find you, but it was dark." "Stop," I said. He stopped. Another beat of silence. Then he did what he always did when cornered. He attacked. "Dad," he said, voice hardening, "you're not thinking straight. You're hurt. You're confused. I didn't leave you. I went to get help." I almost laughed. The audacity would have been impressive if it wasn't so vile. "You went to get help," I said, "and took your tent, your gear, and erased your tracks." "Dad, what?" "Listen to me," I said. "I'm not confused, and I'm not dead, and you are not touching my company." He went silent long enough that I could hear his breathing. Then softly he said, "You're making a mistake." That sentence was not a plea. It was a warning. I hung up. In the next hour, I did 3 things. First, I called the sheriff's office and told them I'd been attacked in the forest and suspected foul play. I didn't name Daniel on the call. I said, "Someone removed the other campsite and left me exposed." That was enough to trigger interest without letting Daniel prepare his defense. Second, I called my attorney, a woman named Diane Larkin, who had been with me through acquisitions and lawsuits and the ugly human side of corporate life. I told her, "My son tried to kill me." Saying it out loud made my stomach twist. Diane didn't gasp. She didn't ask if I was sure. She said, "Where are you? Are you safe?" "I'm sending private security to your home and to the office." Third, I called my daughter, Claire. Claire was my older child from Margaret's first marriage. I'd raised her as my own since she was 6. Daniel had always resented her quiet competence, as if her steadiness was an insult. Claire answered on the first ring. "Anthony, I got a message you were in the hospital." "I'm all right," I said. "Oh, thank God." Her voice cracked. "Daniel told me you collapsed." "Daniel lies," I said. A pause. Then carefully, "What did he do?" I stared at the ceiling, fighting the sudden burn in my eyes. It humiliated me to feel grief now, grief for the son I'd imagined, grief for the reality I couldn't avoid. "He left me in the forest," I said, "with wolves." There was silence so long I thought the call dropped. Then Claire whispered, "I always knew he'd do something like this." I closed my eyes. "I wanted you to be wrong." "I wanted to be wrong too," she said. "What do you need?" "I need you to pick up my grandchildren," I said. "Today. Take them to your house. Don't tell Daniel where. Don't tell Sabrina where. Just get them safe." Claire didn't hesitate. "I'm already on my way." When I ended the call, I lay back against the hospital bed and felt a new kind of fear settle in. Daniel had escalated to wolves. If he realized I was alive, he would escalate again. And this time, he would do it in my world, where his reach was longer than claws in the dark. I was released that night with strict instructions and a leg that throbbed with every heartbeat. Diane had a car waiting, along with a quiet man in a suit who didn't introduce himself and didn't need to. His job was to be a shadow between me and whoever wanted me harmed. As we drove back toward the city, I stared out the window at passing headlights and made myself think like a businessman, not a wounded father. Daniel's plan had two parts. Part 1, remove me. Part 2, take control quickly while confusion covered him. That meant he was already moving pieces I hadn't seen. And the question that haunted me was not, why would he do it? I knew why. Money, control, resentment. The question was, who was helping him? Because luring wolves and erasing a campsite wasn't a childish tantrum. It was logistics. It was planning. It was someone who had learned to treat human life like a problem to solve. When we arrived at my house, the lights were on. 2 more security men stood near the garage. Diane's firm didn't play around. Inside, everything looked normal, and that normality made my skin crawl. Diane met me in my kitchen. She was in her late 50s, sharp-eyed, hair pulled back, her presence like a locked door. "Tell me everything," she said. I did. The board meeting, the appointment of Aaron, the camping trip, the bite, the empty clearing, the messages. When I finished, Diane didn't soften. She said, "We need evidence. We need more than your word against his." "I know," I said. "Caleb Warren is documenting the scene." "Good," Diane said. "We'll also pull phone location data, vehicle GPS, credit card charges, anything that proves he left the site and didn't go for help the way he'll claim." My stomach twisted. "He'll say I'm unstable." Diane nodded. "He'll try." "And the company?" "Locked down," she said. "Aaron is holding, but Daniel is in the building. He's stirring people up." "I'm going there," I said. Diane's eyes sharpened. "Not without protection." "Of course not," I said, "but I need to see what he's doing." The next morning, I walked into my own headquarters on a cane I hated, with 2 security men flanking me. The lobby smelled the same: coffee, fresh paint, money. People stared. Some looked relieved. Some looked confused. Some looked frightened, like they'd spent the night believing a story they didn't want to question. Daniel was in my office. He'd always liked my office. It had the best view. When I pushed open the door, he was standing behind my desk as if he'd been born there, phone in hand, smiling at someone on a video call. He ended the call when he saw me. His smile froze, then transformed into theatrical relief. "Dad," he said loudly for the benefit of anyone listening outside. "You're alive. Thank God." I didn't answer the performance. Aaron stood near the window, face pale, eyes alert. He looked like a man holding a dam back with his hands. Daniel stepped around my desk as if he wanted to hug me. I held up my hand. "Don't," I said. His eyes flicked to the security men. Something cold flashed there. He lowered his voice. "You're embarrassing me." "You tried to kill me," I said. Daniel's expression didn't crack the way an innocent man's would. It tightened. Then he leaned in slightly, voice soft as a confession. "You think that because you need to," he said, "because you can't accept that you're old and things happen." Aaron's jaw flexed. "Daniel," he warned. Daniel ignored him. "Dad, I told everyone you had a medical emergency. I was trying to protect the company while you were incapacitated." I stared at him, and in that moment I saw it clearly. Daniel's reality was a room he built around himself. In that room he was always the hero, always justified. "You were trying to seize control," I said. He spread his hands. "Control? I'm your son. This is my legacy too." "It's not," I said. His eyes narrowed. "It will be." I looked at Aaron. "How much damage?" Aaron swallowed. He tried to access quality logs. He demanded passwords. He's been meeting with finance. I felt my pulse kick. Quality logs. That wasn't just about signing checks. That was about safety. That was about our devices in operating rooms. That was about lives. I turned back to Daniel. Why were you in the quality systems? Daniel's smile returned, slow. Because that's where the problems are, Dad. The ones you've been hiding. The sentence was a blade. What problems? I asked. Daniel stepped closer. You want to hand this company to Aaron Mitchell? Fine. But the board should know the truth first. Aaron's face went white. What are you talking about? Daniel lifted his phone, thumb hovering as if ready to send something. There was a defect in the new arthroscopic trocar line. You knew. You pushed production anyway. If that gets out, you're done. The company collapses. Your legacy burns. And you don't get to choose who inherits ashes. For a split second, the room tilted. There was no defect. Not in that line. I knew every report. Unless Daniel had created one. My mind snapped into focus with a clarity I hadn't felt since the wolves. This was his second hook, his second plan. If he couldn't kill me cleanly, he'd destroy me publicly and take what was left. Show me, I said quietly. Daniel's eyes glittered. Oh, I will. He turned toward Aaron with a look of false sympathy. You don't want to be the CEO of a scandal, do you? You're a good man. I almost respect that. Aaron's fists clenched. Stop. Daniel looked back at me. Sign the interim appointment away. Put me in. Quietly. And all of this goes away. The office felt airless. This wasn't a son pleading for recognition. This was extortion. I realized then that the wolves weren't the main betrayal. They were just the crude part. The real betrayal was this. Daniel was willing to endanger patients, employees, and my grandchildren's future to satisfy his own hunger. I kept my face calm. I'd negotiated billion-dollar contracts with men who smiled while they lied. Daniel was my son, but he was not the most dangerous liar I'd met. All right, I said, and felt Aaron flinch beside me. Let's talk. Daniel's shoulders eased, triumphant. He gestured toward the chairs. We sat. And while Daniel talked about succession and protecting the company, my mind moved elsewhere, building a trap. Because Daniel had just shown me his weakness. He couldn't resist control. He couldn't resist proving he was smarter. And that meant he would show his hand if I let him believe he was winning. I met Diane that afternoon with Caleb Warren's preliminary report in hand. Caleb had found it. A deer carcass, dragged and partially hidden near the edge of the clearing. Fresh enough to still stink. Cut open in places, intentionally. Not a natural kill. He'd found traces of human scent near it. He'd found boot prints that matched the pattern of Daniel's hiking boots, the ones Daniel had proudly shown me before the trip. Caleb had photographed every print, every drag mark, every torn patch of ground. He'd also found something else. A small plastic container, the kind hunters use for scent baiting, tucked under leaves. It reeked of blood and attractant. Caleb didn't say Daniel's name, but his eyes had said it for him. Diane laid the photos out on my kitchen table like evidence in a trial. This is good, she said. We need more. We need to tie him to the scene with hard data. I nodded. We will. And Daniel's threats about defects? She asked. He's bluffing, I said. Or he's manufacturing. Diane's mouth tightened. Then we need to get ahead of it. That night I asked Aaron to meet me at my house after dark, not in the office where Daniel's allies could watch. Aaron arrived looking exhausted. I'm sorry, he said the moment he stepped inside. I didn't know it would become this. This isn't your fault, I said. He looked at my bandaged leg. He did that. I nodded once. Saying it again made it more real. Aaron's eyes filled, not with tears but with fury. What do you want me to do? I slid a folder across my table. Inside were two things. One, a temporary restraining order application Diane had drafted, designed to keep Daniel away from me, my home, and the company pending investigation. Two, a document authorizing an independent third-party audit of our quality and production systems, beginning immediately, with special focus on the line Daniel had mentioned. Aaron read it, then looked up. "You're inviting scrutiny." "I'm inviting truth," I said. Aaron swallowed. "Daniel will panic." "That's the point," I said. Aaron hesitated. "What if he tries something worse?" "He will," I said, because pretending otherwise was how people ended up dead in the woods. "So we control where he tries it." Aaron's gaze sharpened. "How?" I leaned back, feeling the ache in my leg, the age in my bones, but also something else. A steady heat that had been building since the moment Bruno tore a wolf off my calf. "He wants to paint me as unstable," I said. "He wants to manufacture a defect. He wants to force a signature, so we give him the opportunity to attempt it, while we're watching." Aaron's face tightened. "You want to catch him?" "Yes," I said. "In the act." Diane arrived with a quiet man carrying a small case. "This is a certified digital forensics consultant," she said. "He's going to help us document everything legally and cleanly. No tricks that get thrown out." I didn't care about theatrics. I cared about certainty. For the next 48 hours, we did what Daniel never expected from the father he thought was soft. We built a cage around him without him noticing. It installed monitoring on every access point Daniel used, every file touched, logged, every email copied, preserved, every badge swipe recorded. The independent audit team arrived on site, announced publicly to staff as a proactive measure after my medical scare. It was framed as responsible leadership. Daniel smiled in meetings and clenched his jaw behind doors. Meanwhile, Diane filed the restraining order quietly, timed to hit Daniel only after we had what we needed. And I did something else, something personal. I met Caleb Warren again. He came to my house at dusk. Bruno at his side, the dog's head nearly level with my kitchen counter. Bruno's gaze stayed on me, as if measuring whether I was still the helpless man in the tent. Caleb set a small memory card on my table. "Trail cam footage," he said. "From a unit I have on a ridge not far from that clearing. It's meant for poachers." My stomach tightened. "Does it show?" Caleb nodded once. "It shows your son." My hands went cold. Caleb didn't play it immediately. He looked at me first. "Are you sure you want to see it?" I hated him for asking, even though it was kindness. "Yes," I said. He inserted the card into a small viewer and turned the screen toward me. The footage was grainy, night vision green. Trees. Movement. Then Daniel appeared, moving fast, dragging something heavy. The carcass. He stopped, looked around, then pulled out the scent container and poured it, deliberate, methodical. Then he walked back toward the clearing. Minutes later, he returned with a pack stuffed full. He looked directly at the camera's general direction, not knowing it existed, and wiped sweat off his brow. Then he did something that made my blood run colder than any wolf. He smiled, not a nervous smile, not a forced smile, a satisfied one. Then he turned and disappeared into the dark. I stared at the frozen image. Caleb's voice was quiet. "This will matter." I swallowed. "Yes." Caleb hesitated, then said, "Bruno didn't just wander into your clearing. He was on a track. We heard something on the radio about a missing camper earlier that night. A call came in, but the station was short-staffed. I went out to check it. Bruno picked up scent and pulled me off trail. I thought he was chasing a wolf." He looked at Bruno. "I think he was chasing the truth." Bruno huffed once, as if offended by being called sentimental. I reached out and rested my hand on his head. His fur was thick, warm, alive. "I owe you," I whispered. Bruno licked my fingers once, then leaned into my hand, heavy and steady, like a promise. By the third day, Daniel's mask began to crack. He couldn't tolerate being watched. He couldn't tolerate Aaron holding authority. He couldn't tolerate the audit team asking questions in rooms he couldn't control. So he made his move. It happened at 5:47 p.m. on a Wednesday, when most staff were leaving and the building began to empty into evening. I was in my office with Aaron and Diane on speakerphone, reviewing audit progress. My leg ached, but I refused to go home early. I wanted Daniel to know I hadn't retreated. Aaron's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then looked up sharply. Security alert. Daniel accessed the restricted quality folder, the one tied to the Tro car line. My heart kicked. Diane's voice came through the speaker immediate. Can you see what he's doing? Aaron's fingers flew. He's uploading something, a file injection. I stood despite my leg's protest. Where is he? Aaron checked a dashboard. Second floor, quality control archive room. That room held physical batch records and a secure terminal tied to regulatory documentation. It was monitored, but only if someone was paying attention. We were paying attention. I signaled the security men outside my door. With me. We moved fast, the elevator too slow, so we took the stairs. My legs screamed, but anger carried me. On the second floor, the hallway lights hummed. The air smelled of paper and printer toner. Quiet. At the archive room door, I saw it. Daniel's badge had been used minutes ago. The lock light still blinked green. I pushed the door open. Daniel stood at the terminal, back to us, shoulders hunched. He had a USB drive in his hand. He froze when he heard me. For a moment, the room held its breath. Then he turned slowly, face composed, as if he'd been expecting this confrontation his whole life. Dad, he said almost gently, you shouldn't be walking around on that leg. What are you doing? I asked. He lifted the USB drive. Fixing what you refused to fix. The security men stepped inside, silent. Daniel's eyes flicked over them. A shadow crossed his face. This is how it is now, he said softly. You bring guards into your own company against your own son. You brought wolves into the forest, I said. Don't talk to me about family. His smile twitched. You keep saying that. I stepped closer. Because it's true. Daniel's gaze hardened. You don't have proof. I almost laughed at the arrogance. I nodded toward the terminal. Step away. Daniel didn't move. Aaron appeared in the doorway behind us, breathing hard. Diane's voice came through my phone, still on speaker, like a witness. Daniel, Diane said calmly, do not touch that computer. Anything you do now is documented. Daniel's eyes widened slightly. He hadn't expected Diane to be involved this deeply. His voice sharpened. You're all in on this. Yes, I said, because you forced it. Daniel's hand tightened around the USB drive. His eyes darted toward the terminal, then toward the door. He was calculating escape. Then his gaze landed on me, and something ugly rose in it. You know, he said, voice low, Mom would be ashamed of you. The sentence was designed to hurt. It did. But it also made something in me finally break free of guilt. I looked at my son and felt the last thread of denial snap. Don't use her, I said quietly. You don't get to speak her name. Daniel's jaw flexed. Then sign it, he hissed. Sign the succession. Put me in, or I burn this place down with your reputation inside it. He lifted the USB drive as if it was a match. I nodded once, slow. All right. Aaron flinched. The security men shifted. Daniel's eyes brightened, hungry. Finally. I reached into my jacket and pulled out a folder. Daniel's gaze locked on it. He stepped forward, almost trembling with triumph. Then I opened the folder and slid out not a resignation, not a succession letter, a restraining order, along with printed stills from Caleb's trail cam footage. Daniel dragging the carcass, pouring scent attractant, smiling in the dark. Daniel's face went blank. "What is this?" he whispered. "It's your life," I said, unmasked. For the first time, real fear flickered in his eyes. He turned toward the terminal, desperate. "This is nothing. It's—" Aaron moved quickly, yanking the USB drive from Daniel's hand. The security men stepped in, pinning Daniel's arms, not violently, but firmly. Daniel struggled, teeth bared. "Get off me!" I held my phone up. The screen displayed the live audit monitor, showing the timestamp of his access, the file injection attempt, the exact moment. "You're trying to fabricate a defect report," I said, "and you're doing it on camera." Daniel's breathing became ragged. He looked at me then, truly looked, as if seeing I wasn't the father he could manipulate anymore. His voice dropped. "You can't do this to me." I stared at him. "You did it to yourself." He jerked against the guards. "You always chose everyone else over me." I felt grief flare, but it didn't soften me. "I chose decency," I said. "I chose people's safety. I chose the truth, and I begged you for years to choose it too." Daniel's eyes flashed. "I tried." "No," I said. "You performed. There's a difference." Diane's voice came through the phone steady. "Anthony, the police are on their way. Do not engage further." Daniel heard that, and his face twisted into something almost feral. "This isn't over," he hissed. I leaned in close enough that he could smell the antiseptic on my bandage. "It is," I said, "because you don't get another chance to hurt anyone." The police arrived within minutes. Daniel was escorted out of the building in cuffs, still shouting. Staff watched from doorways, stunned. Some cried. Some looked away. I didn't watch him leave. I watched the faces of the employees he'd threatened with his chaos, the engineers, the technicians, the quiet people who showed up every day to make instruments that mattered. And I felt something heavy lift. But relief didn't come clean. That night, after the statements and the paperwork and the ugly process of turning a son into a suspect, I sat alone in my house and stared at the family photos on my wall. Margaret's smile in a frame. Claire holding her first baby. Daniel as a child, missing front teeth, covered in mud, laughing. I put my head in my hands and let myself feel the grief I'd been avoiding for years. Not grief for the man Daniel was. Grief for the boy he had been and the father I'd failed to protect him from becoming. My phone buzzed. Claire. "They're safe," she said softly. "Emma and Luke are asleep in my guest room." My throat tightened. "Thank you." Claire hesitated. "Do you want to talk to him? They're going to ask if you want to press charges." I closed my eyes. "I'm pressing." Claire exhaled, not surprised. "Good." I swallowed. "How are the kids?" Claire's voice softened. "Confused, but safe." I whispered, "Safe is enough." The next weeks moved like a storm through my life. There were hearings, orders, statements, medical reports. Caleb's footage was handed to investigators. IT logs and audit documentation sealed the case like a vice. The prosecutors didn't treat it as a family dispute. They treated it as what it was: attempted homicide, evidence tampering, corporate fraud. Daniel's defense tried the predictable things. They implied I was unstable. They suggested a misunderstanding. They painted the forest as an unfortunate accident. Then the footage played. Then Caleb testified about the bait. Then the forensic team showed Daniel's file injection attempt. Then Daniel's own messages were laid out, the timeline revealing lies that no grief could excuse. Daniel didn't look at me in court. He looked at the ceiling as if God might intervene out of pity. I sat behind my attorney, my leg healed into a scar, my cane beside me, my hands steady. When the judge read the sentence, Daniel's shoulders sagged as if the weight of consequence was heavier than he'd ever imagined. Prison. Not a slap on the wrist. Not a negotiated apology. Prison. I didn't feel victory the way people imagine it. I felt finality. After the sentencing, Diane walked with me out of the courthouse. "You did what you had to," she said. I stared at the steps leading down to the street. "I did what I should have done years ago." Diane didn't argue. Outside, reporters shouted questions. I ignored them. Across the street, Caleb Warren stood near his truck, Bruno at his side, both of them like an anchor in a world that had become too loud. Caleb tipped his head. "You all right?" I looked at Bruno. He wagged his tail once, slow, like he was saying, "You're still here." "I'm alive," I said. Caleb nodded. "That's a win." Weeks later, I sat in the same glass conference room where this had begun. The board was quieter now. Humility tends to grow after a near catastrophe. Aaron Mitchell sat beside me, hands folded, eyes steady. I cleared my throat. "As planned, I'm stepping down." No one argued. I looked at Aaron. "Aaron Mitchell will serve as CEO effective immediately." Aaron's gaze met mine. "I won't waste it," he said. "I know," I replied. There was a vote. It passed unanimously. After the meeting, Aaron stayed behind. He hesitated, then said, "Anthony, I'm sorry for what you lost." I stared out at the city. "I lost him a long time ago," I said. "I just refused to admit it." Aaron's voice was quiet. "What will you do now?" I thought of my grandchildren asleep at Claire's house, safe because I'd finally stopped protecting the wrong person. "I'll be a grandfather," I said, "the way I should have been. Present, honest, not afraid." Aaron nodded, eyes bright. "You deserve peace." I didn't say I deserved anything. But that evening when I went to Claire's house and Emma ran into my arms so hard it almost knocked my breath out, I felt something close to peace. Her small voice pressed into my shirt. "Grandpa, are you hurt?" I kissed her hair. "I'm okay." Luke, older by 2 years, stood behind her, watching me like a little man trying to understand the world's sharp edges. His eyes were Daniel's eyes, and that terrified me until he stepped forward and took my hand. "Did the dog save you?" he asked. I swallowed. "Yes." Luke nodded as if that made sense. "Dogs are better than wolves." Claire's gaze met mine over their heads, and I saw the same thought in her. Dogs are better than people sometimes, too. I sat with them that night, telling them a softened version of the story, enough to explain the scar without poisoning their hearts. I told them about a big dog named Bruno who was brave. I told them about a ranger who helped me. I didn't tell them their father had been the darkness in the woods. They would learn what they needed when they were older. My job now was not to make them hate. My job was to make sure they never became the kind of man who would lure wolves to hurt someone who loved him. Later, after they fell asleep, Claire poured me tea and sat across from me in the quiet. "Do you regret it?" she asked. I stared at the steam rising from the cup. "Regret what?" "Choosing the company over him," she said softly. I shook my head. "I chose life over him," I said. "Mine, yours, those kids, the people who trust what we make." Claire's eyes glistened. "He did this?" "Yes," I said. "He did." Outside, the wind moved through trees the way it had in Black Pines, but here it was just wind, not a pack circling. My phone buzzed once. A message from Caleb. "Bruno sends his regards. He's back on patrol. Stay safe, Anthony." I stared at it, then typed back with slow, deliberate fingers. "Tell Bruno I'm still walking." Because I was. Not unscarred, not unchanged, but alive. And in the end, that was the thing my son could not take from me, no matter how many wolves he tried to summon out of the dark.
My grandpa's words really happened. I believe him. If you want more true tales like this, hit subscribe.